Hello, I'm Hereward Tilton from the University of the Sunshine Coast.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Rampling. I'm a historian of alchemy.
Hello, I'm Peter Forshaw, historian of Western esotericism at the University of Amsterdam.
What is alchemy? Of course it meant different things at different moments in its very long history, but really the common thread in this long tradition is a set of ideas and practices for manipulating and usually transforming materials in order to understand them, replicate them, and usually to make them more valuable and more useful.
Alchemy, for me, is the science of transformation. Initially of external matter, such as in gold making, but later with the development of chemical medicine, the transformation of the matter inside ourselves, be that physical wounds or even the beginning of psychiatric medicine.
Alchemy is the transformation of natural matter into new forms with different applications. It uses technologies like calcination, distillation, sublimation, what practitioners centuries ago called the arts of fire. Alchemy produces glass, ceramics, and metal alloys, oils, spirits, and salts. So if you drink beer, wine, whiskey, gin, etc., you are, in fact, partaking in an alchemical process, including the glassware.
I'm intrigued by a tension that lies at the heart of alchemy. It's a practical art. It's about making things using real stuff. But alchemists don't just want to be identified as practitioners. They call themselves philosophers. They claim that alchemy is part of science, philosophy, because it's grounded in nature. And they try to heighten that prestige through the way that they write, using a secret philosophical language. But that language can't move too far away from practice either, because alchemy will lose prestige without tangible results. So, alchemy is a balancing act.
So this could mean anything from distilling minerals in order to make medicines, coloring glass to make artificial gemstones, analyzing matter to better understand its chemical makeup or origins, and of course, processing base metals in order to transform them into the much more valuable and highly sought after gold and silver.
Already in the 14th century, Petrus Bonus had suggested that alchemy has both natural and supernatural dimensions for the enrichment of the spiritual or religious life of individuals. I would agree that the majority of alchemists were working on matter for natural ends, but I'm particularly interested in the supernatural aspect. For example, the perfection of matter for the creation of magical talismans, or indeed of exorcistic or prophetic philosopher's stones.
Among other things, alchemy is the laboratory quest for the philosopher's stone, the agent of transmutation which promises long life, the cure of disease, and the artificial production of gold. In the post-Reformation period, we find the enigmatic symbolism of alchemy applied to processes of inner transformation, or used to describe a transfiguring heavenly ascent brought about by the philosopher's stone itself. In its broadest sense, we are dealing with an alchemia archetypica, encompassing archetypal laws of transmutation in the macrocosm and the human microcosm alike.
Good evening and welcome to Furnace and Fugue, an Alchemical Happy Hour. My name is Daniel John Mitchell and I am Director of the Center for Historical Research at the Science History Institute, broadcasting to you from my home here in Philadelphia. We're really thrilled that you've chosen to join us for the extraordinary alchemical extravaganza that is this installment of our Roman Haas Fellow in Focus lecture series. Now, ordinarily, we would select a fellow or former fellow with some intriguing historical insights to share, put them up on stage, open the doors to our lecture theatre, dim the lights, and let them entertain and inform us. But in thinking about how to translate this into a virtual format, we quickly realized that the performative element, the spectacle, if you will, could not be recreated. We would all miss being together in person. Now, of course, that goes without saying, but if we must remain socially distanced, why not take advantage of the unique possibilities for a lecture offered by the digital format and bring a global audience along for the ride? And we were inspired in this by the very object of our program today, Furnace and Fugue, a multimedia digital project that allows us to hear, see, and investigate the Atalanta Fugiens, a remarkable 17th century book inspired by Ovid's Legend of Atalanta, written by the alchemist Michael Maier. We're really excited about the smorgasbord of a program we've developed for you this evening in collaboration with the two former Science History Institute fellows who co-edited Furnace and Fugue, Donna Bilak and Tara Numadol. You'll be hearing from them, as well as from some of the constellation of independent researchers, digital scholars, rare books curators, and musical performers they brought together, who will be joined by a few of my colleagues at the Institute's Offmer Library of Chemical History. We've already learned about the nature of alchemy, and we'll soon learn how to read Atalanta's alchemical emblems. We'll turn the pages of our copy of the Atalanta and be treated to a guided musical tour, so to speak, of the music it contained. And we'll find out how the Science History Institute, as a community, supported the Andrew W. Mellon-funded Brown University Digital Publishing Initiative in reimagining the Atalanta for the digital age. You'll be able to ask questions at various points along the way, and before we wrap up, we'll invite you to reward yourself with our special alchemy-themed cocktail. To guide you through each of these fascinating segments, I'm going to hand over to my most genial and creative colleague, Alexis Pedrick, and I will see you back again at the end of what we hope will be, dare I say, a transformative experience. Alexis.
Hi, everyone. So as Daniel said, we are excited to have you with us this evening. So I'm going to give you a few details about how you can participate in that Q&A. At certain points in the evening, we'll let you know that you can ask all of our fascinating speakers some questions. You can use the chat function here on YouTube. Just log into your YouTube account or Gmail account. You can also email your questions to us at socialmedia@sciencehistory.org. And again, that's socialmedia@sciencehistory.org. We'll be keeping an eye on email and an eye on chat, so we will get your questions. So on to this extravaganza. As Daniel laid out, we have a lot of fun alchemy stuff packed into this evening, and we hope you're going to be as fascinated by all of it as we are. The cocktail break will come a little bit earlier, but feel free, if you need one now, to go ahead and whet your appetite. Before we get into all of the alchemy details, I think the place to start is, well, at the beginning. What is the Atalanta Fugiens, and how was it made?
Okay, so what I have to show you today is Michael Maier's Atalanta Fugiens, which is an alchemical emblem book. Now, emblem books were a genre of publication that were popular in the 17th century. And what they had was they would have usually an engraving with a motto and a poem. And then to top it off, it has with every emblem and motto and poem a set of music. So it's just, it takes the emblem book and it just dials it up to 11 in terms of its interconnection and its intricacy. The book is interesting to historians because alchemists had a long tradition of writing in riddles. And Michael Maier was certainly, a very prominent alchemist. And the game with an emblem book is to decode what the emblem is trying to convey to you. And they weren't always, in fact, they were usually not alchemical. Usually they were about some human virtue or something like that. And it was an intellectual game for the upper classes to look at the emblem and try to decode it in terms of how the motto and the poem and the image went together. The first 10, in our copy, the first 10 engravings are hand-colored, some of them quite beautifully. What that means is they're almost certainly not done at the time the book was published. It's kind of a rule of thumb that the nicer the hand coloring, the more likely it is not to have been original. So someone later in the life of this book decided to color these illustrations and got through about 10 of them before deciding, maybe it's not really worth it. It is the most, in some ways, the most puzzling of all the alchemical books because it's so complex in all of its layers.
I'm Stephen Tabor, curator of rare books at the Huntington Library in San Marino, California. It would have taken months to produce this thing even without the illustrations. The text of the book is standard hand typesetting, about 1 character per second. What makes it complicated is the addition of music. And music was a specialized typesetting operation, particularly prone to errors. They may have had to farm that out to another specialist printer. And then you have the copperplate engravings, which are an entirely different operation.
I'm Michael Gaudio, professor of art history at the University of Minnesota. I work on the history of prints and print culture in early modern Europe. The artist who is responsible for the plates in Atalanta Fugiens is Matthias Mirian. And he was trained as an etcher, which means his technique was different than the technique of printmaking that went into the debris firm's earlier publications, which used engraving. Engraving is a slow and laborious technique of using a device called a burin to gouge out lines in a plate. Etching is a much quicker process that uses an acid resist ground on a plate, and the artist uses a needle to just draw on that plate as if you were making a drawing. And as you draw on it with the needle, you uncover the metal plate underneath, which you can then immerse in an acid bath, which eats into the plate and creates lines that can then print.
And they were added after the text was already set and printed. There were holes left in the text for the illustrations, and those went to a separate press, maybe in a separate establishment or at least a separate room that looked nothing like the letterpress. Every impression of each of those illustrations took some number of minutes to ink and prepare and run through the press. I would estimate close to 10 minutes per illustration per copy.
The esoteric symbols that you can find throughout the Atalanta Fugiens, all of them having to do in one way or another with the alchemical process. And those symbols include things like using depictions of the sun to represent sulfur and the moon to represent mercury. So, for example, one of the plates has 2 human figures, one with the head of the sun, one with the head of the moon, meant to represent sulfur and mercury. People who were familiar with alchemical symbolism would have understood them, but there's also other clues as to what these symbols mean. And so you're going to get clues for the symbolism of the image in the other parts of the emblem. The image is going to help you understand, in turn, some of the text and the fugue. All of this meant to engage, as Michael Maier explicitly says, all of your senses. So it's not a book to be read from cover to cover. It's one to move back and forth in and sort of play this game that Michael Maier has set up for us.
So we are only just beginning to scratch the surface. Here to tell us a little bit more and take a deep dive into some of her favorite emblems is Donna Bilak. Donna is a historian of early modern science, specializing in the study of 17th century emblematics, alchemical laboratories, and the production and trade of chemical medicine in the British Atlantic world. She received her PhD from the Bard Graduate Center, and she is the creative director of 12 Keys Consultancy and Design LLC. Now, Furnace and Fugue builds on research Donna conducted as an Edelstein postdoctoral research fellow here at the Science History Institute. So Donna, why don't you take it away?
Pleasure to be here. I know I'm just this disembodied voice in a library with a copy of Atalanta Fugiens sitting on a table, but you'll be seeing enough of me later on in this hour. So let's start with the book. And with Michael Maier. Michael Maier was a 17th century German physician and alchemist and a prolific alchemical author. Atalanta Fugiens is Maier's most complex, enigmatic work. It's designed as a musical alchemical emblem book that presents his paean to wisdom achieved through the knowledge and practice of alchemical arts. Now, the title page sets the stage for our entry into an immersive alchemical experience, which is what I'm going to treat or subject you to, as the case may be, for the next 9 minutes. And we'll start here with the title page and take a closer look at the title itself, which reads in English translation, Atalanta Fleeing. That is, New Chemical Emblems About the Secrets of Nature. That's the full title. And the text block goes on to state that the book is organized around 50 sets of vocal scores and emblems, musical emblems. Maier invites the reader to use the faculties of intellect, sound, and sight to unpack their alchemical secrets. Lavishly illustrated vignettes surrounding the title elaborate Maier's retelling of a famous story, the legendary race between Atalanta and her suitor Hippomenes from Ovid's Metamorphoses, the classical epic about fabulous transformations. Now, in Ovid's version, Venus, goddess of love, gave Hippomenes, a mortal man, 3 golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides to cast before the fleet-footed huntress Atalanta during their contest to distract and slow her down. Hippomenes did as instructed, thereby winning the race, as well as Atalanta's hand. But things ended badly for the 2 lovers. Hippomenes failed to give Venus proper thanks, angering the goddess. So the 2 lovers ended up being transformed into lions as punishment for ingratitude. So what does all this have to do with alchemy, you may well ask? Well, Maier explains how he has retooled Ovid's classical tale into an audiovisual presentation of alchemical theory and practice in the author's epigram. Here, we learn that Atalanta represents mercury, the quality of moisture, and that Hippomenes represents sulfur, the quality of heat or fire. Presumably, the delaying apple represents salt or dryness, an illusion that would complete the tria prima of transmutational alchemy. Gold making, known as chrysopoeia, was a medical alchemical pursuit whose goal was the production of the great elixir, or the philosopher's stone. Certain alchemists, like Maier, understood these products of metallic transmutation as a panacea, a potent remedy that could restore health and increase human lifespan, produced through a series of complex chemical processes involving the manipulation and purification of matter. The author's epigram allegorizes the preparation of this powerful medicine as the union of Atalanta as mercury and Hippomenes as sulfur. Maier refers to their alchemical transformation as the double lion, created by the combination of 2 different qualities to produce a new state of matter, the philosopher's stone. So let's venture deeper into the book. I'll explain what an emblem is, and I'll show you how to read one. To begin with, the emblem book was a hugely popular literary genre in the 17th century. In Atalanta Fugiens, Maier playfully engages the reader's imagination in ways that he conceals and reveals information about alchemical theory and practice. He scatters clues about these things throughout the pages of his book, embedded in the details of his musical emblems for the reader to detect, collect, and solve. As a musical alchemical emblem book, Atalanta Fugiens presents Maier's alchemical program as an interactive game. Essentially, an emblem is a clever puzzle that contains a concealed message packaged in pictorial and textual elements. It's organized according to a motto image epigram format and read in descending order like a scroll. So let's take a look at emblem 3. In English, the motto reads, "Go to a woman washing cloths, you do likewise." The accompanying image depicts a simply dressed female standing between a smoking furnace and a steaming barrel in the act of pouring liquid into the barrel from a smaller vessel she holds in her hand. A pile of cloths lie in the lower left-hand corner. The epigram reads, "Whoever of you loves to scrutinize hidden doctrines, don't you be idle. Bring everything which could be helpful into your model. Don't you see how the woman is accustomed to clean stained cloths with hot water, which she tops off? Imitate this woman, and you will not thus be frustrated in your art, for the wave washes the soil of a black body." Okay, so let me prime your imagination for the interpretation of emblem 3 with an analogy. Think of the emblem that you see before you, the whole motto image epigram format, as akin to the shell of a nut. The husk encases the kernel. Similarly, the emblem's textual and graphic elements encase its hidden inner meaning. The emblem's meaning is revealed by apprehending textual and visual clues, puzzling out the interplay between word and image, and recognizing the literary allusions that structure the emblem. So let's now collect some of the clues that Maier embedded here in emblem 3. First, the savvy early modern reader, steeped in alchemical knowledge, would recognize the literary source underpinning the motto in emblem 3 as a reference from another alchemical text on the subject of women's work and children's games. This particular text compares women's work and child's play with alchemical processes consisting of mixing, washing, and cooking the 4 elements. That is fire, earth, water, and air. Maier allegorizes the motto and its literary allusion in the image of the washerwoman mixing substances, and the epigram develops the theme of knuckling down to hard work in the laboratory by instructing us to follow her example in cleansing our philosophical matter to remove impurities. So, the washerwoman pours liquid into a steaming barrel. A spigot at its bottom spews liquid into a smaller vat. Behind her, we see a vigorously smoking furnace with roaring flames stoked by the bundles of wood piled before it. Maier thus signals 2 contrasting types of intense heat, dry heat and humid heat, evoking the operations of roasting and boiling. The 17th century alchemist, who read Hermetic texts and experimented in the laboratory, might connect Maier's alchemical allusion to the actions involved in women's work with the billowing clouds of smoke and steam that dominate the image, and thus understand emblem 3 as a playful reference to calcination. Maier describes calcination as the first of 7 alchemical stages of purification in producing the Philosopher's Stone in Discourse 3. Each of the 50 emblems is in fact accompanied by its own discourse that's packed with bibliographic references about alchemical theory and practice, containing further clues for unpacking the mysteries of the emblem. So back to emblem 3. Emblem 3 discusses calcination as matter being cleansed or washed by the licking of intense flames inside of the reverberatory furnace. This type of furnace is used for high temperature heating. Its design drives flames downward, generating the potent fire that reduces matter into fine ash. The idea of the reduction or oxidization of matter through the calcining fire is conveyed textually, visually, and musically in Emblem 3. The cloths referenced in the motto are depicted as piles here in the lower left-hand corner, subtly juxtaposed with piles of sandy drifts in the opposite corner, signifying the change from solid to particle that is characteristic of calcination. The music that accompanies Emblem 3 reinforces the allusion to calcination. Lauren Ludwig will discuss the music in detail for us shortly, so I'll just point out a few interesting features relating to the interpretation of Emblems 3. As you can see, there are 3 voices, scored as the 3 protagonists from Ovid's story, Atalanta, Hippomenes, and the delaying apple, which symbolize the 3 principal elements of transmutational alchemy, that is, mercury, sulfur, and salt. Notationally, the alchemical voices mimic laboratory operations. An early modern reader, who was musically literate, would be attentive to the resonance between the image depicted in Emblem 3 and the melody in Fugue 3, which features a series of rapid notes evocative of a licking flame or running water. So here's the reveal. Emblem 3 presents an allegorical laboratory. The interplay of music, image, and text forms a didactic emblem about starting the great work with calcination, the first of the 7 alchemical laboratory stages. Emblem 3 instructs the alchemist about the labor and diligence required to lay the proper foundation for making the philosopher's stone, embodied in the methodical work of the washerwoman. The rest of Atalanta Fugiens unfolds as an alchemical journey with multiple pathways. Each emblem contains a specific message that the reader must puzzle out in order to unlock the book's secrets. Maier designed a wonderfully complex, imaginative alchemical program, which we've reimagined in our digital edition, Furnace and Fugue, and we cordially invite you to explore our creation and undertake your own alchemical journey. Thank you. Back to you, Alexis.
All right. So first of all, thank you for this. This is fascinating. I could spend hours getting into it, but we have some questions from the chat, so I'm going to share with the audience. So one question is from Nikki. How many copies of the Atalanta Fugiens were printed?
Oh my gosh.
No, I feel like I've heard Steve, who was on the video there, talk say maybe 1,000 copies, which sounds like a lot, given how long it must have taken to make.
Well, I'll go with what Steve says because he's the expert. Atalanta Fugiens has been a collector's item for bibliophiles for 4 centuries, and because it's so beautiful and so mysterious and so enigmatic. I've had the good fortune to physically handle 15 individual copies that are held at different institutions and research libraries. So I can attest to the various either wear and tear that they've been through, or the beautiful treatment through bleaching and gilding of the edges of the pages and binding them in expensive Moroccan leather. So this book has been valued and copied since it was lifted off the press of the debris back in 1617, 1618. On a quick note, though, actually, Hereward Tilton, who is one of our contributors, you saw him speaking at the What is Alchemy segment of our show here. Hereward was involved with a group of scholars who translated 9 letters by Michael Maier that he wrote in the remaining months of his life. Obviously, he didn't know it was the remaining months of his life, but looking back, that's the time frame. And Maier mentions in one of the letters, he makes reference to the money that he lost in his emblem book. So it looks like Maier had high hopes for this book to perhaps secure him patronage in troubled times.
And it didn't quite quite work out. We have a question. Actually, I've been curious about this too. From Ovine, she says, "Do you or he says, do you think Maier concocted these emblems using a scientific method, or that there was something mystical or like poetic behind his thinking?"
Okay, there's like 4 essays from Furnace and Fugue that I can direct you to. Actually, the entire edition will answer and address that question from different viewpoints. From the music, Lauren talks about, well, I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but the music itself presents puzzles, sonic puzzles, if you will. My essay talks about the kind of game that Maier may have designed his book around concealing, which is a magic square, a mathematical puzzle. Pete Forshaw also discusses Atalanta Fugiens' place within the larger corpus of Maier's published works. So there's actually a number of wonderful grappling hooks that we can give you, curious listener to our event, to take a deep dive into Furnace and Fugue and explore that question really from very different angles, from the music, from the image, and from the text. But in my view, I propose that Maier did indeed design the book around concealing a hidden mathematical puzzle, a magic square.
All right.
So
I'm gonna so we have one last quick question, and I see a couple here coming in about the music, and we are actually going to jump into the music very quickly. So you'll get that. But we have a question from Margaret about what does the dragon eating its own tail mean?
Well, that signifies the Ouroboros, or infinity. You know, there's different alchemical traditions that would interpret this this symbol in different kinds of ways. Alchemy is really a series of ongoing, overlapping, sometimes entangled histories. So how different scholars that take different approaches to studying and understanding alchemy, whether from an early modern perspective or from a Jungian perspective, the Ouroboros will mean different things. There's actually an excellent exhibition catalog, Art and Alchemy, that wonderfully fuses together scholarship about early modern alchemy with 19th and 20th century art forms that were inspired by Jungian perspectives on alchemy. And I would actually encourage the listener who asked that question to take a deep dive into that exhibition catalog.
All right. Well, there you have it. Well, thank you, Donna. We're going to see you a little bit later on in the show.
I'm excited.
So we'll wave goodbye to you for the moment. All right, so we've got emblems. We know a little bit about how the book was made. I think we should get into the music. We mentioned that the Atalanta Fugiens has a musical score. So this book actually has a music director. Here to tell us more is Lauren Ludwig. Lauren studied viola da gamba at Oberlin Conservatory and holds a PhD in critical and comparative studies in music from the University of Virginia. As a viol player, Lauren performs widely as a soloist and a chamber musician. He's the co-founder of the critically acclaimed ensemble Les Strange Viols and the 17th century string band Acronym. As a scholar of early modern musical culture, Lauren researches what he terms polyphonic intimacy, the idea that in the Western tradition, music is constructed to foster social relationships among its performers and, like you, listeners. Lauren has served as musicology faculty at the Peabody Institute of Johns Hopkins University, Grinnell College, and the New Zealand School of Music. He teaches chamber music and performance practice at residencies and festivals across 4 continents. So, Lauren, I think the floor is all yours.
Good evening, everybody. One of Atalanta Fugiens' most fascinating and most puzzling features is its music. Each of the 50 emblems features a three-part musical canon, or fuga, as Maier calls it, that dramatizes Atalanta's famous foot race with Hippomenes. Each canon features a leading part, the first musical voice to enter, named after Atalanta, a following voice named after Hippomenes that typically comes in a few notes later to imitate the leading voice verbatim, and a slow-moving pomumorans, the apple voice, let's call it, made up of whole notes and half notes that actually somewhat resembles round apples on the page. And as Donna described, these are all freighted with various layers of symbolic meaning. Naomi, I'm hoping that we can look at emblem 23 here. So I'd like to play just a little bit of the music to orient you to it. This will be familiar because it happens to have been the soundtrack that you heard in some sections earlier in the presentation. Here we have the modern edition in score format, and I'm just going to scroll down so you can see the page of music as it appears in the early 17th century publication. And we've got the Atalanta voice, the Hippomenes voice, and the apple voice as Donna described. So let's just listen to a bit of this beautiful music. So that was the first of 3 verses. Each emblem has a fugue that is made up of 3 voices that proceeds in 3 verses. A lot of these nested, interlocking threes. Naomi, you can return to me. These compositions are complicated and would have required the skill and experience of a professional composer. Yet generations of scholars have scratched their heads about the very mixed quality of Atalanta's 50 canons. Many, even most, seem to be artfully executed, while several stand out as being structurally ill-conceived and rife with musical errors. Given the overall high quality of the engravings, the Latin epigrams, and the short essays on alchemy, the discursus, what are we to make of the mixed quality of the music across the collection? A few years ago, I made a discovery. It turns out that 40 of the 50 pieces Maier used in his alchemical emblem book had been published in the 1590s in an obscure collection by the Englishman John Farmer. Maier traveled frequently to England and likely supposed that no one in his alchemical circle in Germany would recognize Farmer's music. He was right. His borrowing remained undetected until a couple years ago, when I stumbled across it while I had both Atalanta and Farmer's Book of Canons open on my desktop. Farmer's 40 canons are sonorous and well-crafted, but Maier needed 50 for his emblem book with 50 emblems, and evidently endeavored to compose the missing 10 himself. A comparison with Farmer shows that Maier placed his canons in odd-numbered emblems, starting with emblem 1. And my essay in Furnace and Fugue sort of lays out this relationship and has a table showing the comparison of Farmer and Maier. So if you want to dig deeper into that, that's a resource. This means that for the last 4 centuries, readers and musicians who have read the book in publication order have encountered a bewildering alternation of good and sometimes shockingly bad music. And here we can insert a joke about the perils of DIY projects, right? Maier wasn't a composer. He needed 10 more. He had 40. He needed 10 more, so he thought he would DIY it. And it didn't work out that well for him, unfortunately. Although I will say that the bad ones, the 10 by Maier, I think are wonderful. They're so twisty and dissonant, and suddenly you're like in 20th century musical world rather than the early modern style that is so beautifully executed by Farmer in his 40 canons. Knowing that Maier conscripted Farmer's 40 canons and composed the rest himself allows us to ask new questions about how the different elements of each emblem, the engraving, epigram, fugue, and discourse, talk to each other, and perhaps together reveal alchemical secrets. But whatever the origin of Atalanta's music has turned out to be, Maier's choice to include canons points to the particular erudite and ludic approach he hoped his readers would take, and which we hope modern users of Furnace and Fugue will explore. Musical canons have always been puzzles that require performers to experiment until they find the hidden musical solution. Canon means rule in Greek, and in its purest form, a musical canon is a written rule accompanied by a short bit of musical notation. And that's in fact how they appear in Atalanta Fugiens. They are some bits of music with some Latin text describing what you're supposed to do with the music. The idea is that the composer conceals a bit of counterpoint in this combination of a texted instruction and a snippet of musical notation. Not unlike, by the way, alchemical knowledge, the way that alchemical knowledge is concealed using allegory and code words to all but those who are in the know. To solve a canon and transmute what's on the page into sounding music, musicians must combine their knowledge of counterpoint with experimentation. They must enact a series of incomplete and often deliberately ambiguous instructions in just the right way. If they achieve this, they are rewarded with the revelation of the wisdom hidden in the canon. They get to experience music's harmony and aesthetic beauty, long understood as a metaphor for the perfection of the universe. If we substitute chemical terms for musical ones in the previous sentences, we reveal the resonance between the intellectual and experimental processes of solving a canon and the intellectual and experimental processes of early modern alchemy. Both music and alchemy center knowledge understood to be passed down from the ancients, and both require the playful experimental combination of complex ingredients to achieve a kind of gnosis. So Maier's inclusion of canonic counterpoint as an essential ingredient of each emblem was sort of brilliant, as he leveraged the similarities of approach and sensibility shared across early modern alchemical and musical practices. Now, Naomi, let's move back to the screen share, and I'm going to navigate us to emblem 46 so we can dive just a little bit deeper into the music here. Emblem 46, there we go. Two eagles come together, one from the west, one from the east, the other from the west. Maier's instruction to his readers in the canon, in the fuga, to the left of your screen, the rule that he presents, reads, and here it is in little, probably it's tiny on your screen, but you can see it written just here where I'm indicating. Prima vox incipiat ab initio, secunda affine et canat versus initiam. Roughly, the first voice starts at the beginning, the second at the end, and sings back to the beginning. Not impossibly complicated, but more than we might reasonably expect modern readers of our digital edition to be able to manage. There are, of course, some people who will dive deep into the notation and try to figure it out and solve the canon, but it's a heavy lift. Yet the emblem's elements all turn on the complex multi-layered metaphor of symmetry described in the epigram. And here I'm going to scroll down to the translation of the epigram, which reads, Great Jove, two eagles out of Delphi sent to the east and western parts for this intent, that he the middle of the earth might find, which, where returning, well resolved his mind. But those two eagles are two stones, which have one from the east, the other from the west. Performing the canon enacts both symmetry and the gesture of flying to a specific spot and then returning from it. Puzzling out and singing this polyphony requires participation in these symmetric dynamics and offers an embodied experience of the literary and chemical metaphors that Maier assumed would enrich readers' understanding and reward their deep engagement. So it would be a shame for a reader to miss out completely on this music. We have relied on technology to help modern readers capture something of the multimedia insights that Maier offered his early modern readers. All 50 fugues, here we scroll back. All 50 fugues are presented in an interface that allows each voice or combination of voices to be experienced separately. And the scrolling playback helps orient those who are less familiar with musical notation. And what I'll do now is just demo a little bit of this functionality so we can explore the canon, the rule that Maier presents. So he says the first voice starts at the beginning. That's the Atalanta voice. And in fact, if you compare the beginning here with the beginning of the Atalanta melody, you'll see that it's the same. So let's listen to just that melody by silencing the other two voices. And now let's look at the second voice. Uh-oh, there we go. Now let's look at the second voice, and we can see how that voice starts at the end and goes forward. And again, the idea here is that you can sort of dive deep into and engage with the music in a way that would be difficult without these tools, if you're not a singer, for example. So the second voice, the Hippomenes voice, starts at the end and sings towards the beginning. That's what the rule, the canon, tells us. So here, let's just listen to the second voice, the Hippomenes voice. I've silenced the other voices. And you can see that we're going to start here and literally read the notation backwards. So here we go. So it's amazing. This canon features this piece where one voice reads from the start, the other voice reads from the end, and they cross each other. And you can see how evocative that is of this idea of eagles being sent to the east and the west, and the illustration of Jove with his eagles. To get a musical experience of this particular symmetry of emblem 46, though, I want to highlight one other feature, and that is the piano roll function. A lot of people aren't that comfortable with notation, either modern or early modern. So there's a nice graphical interface here that we've provided, and I'll just click on And forgive me for stopping a bit before the cadence, but what's cool about this is that visually you can really see the symmetry that's encoded in this canon. And that's like central to the whole stack of metaphors that Maier is building up here, alchemical and classical and musical. And you can just visually see the symmetry on this piano roll function. So I think that's cool that we've added another visual element to help decode this stuff and experience it. Professor of history at Princeton, Jennifer Rampling, who you met at the very beginning, notes in her introductory essay to Furnace and Fugue that early modern readers, quote, learned to approach alchemical texts and images as puzzles to be solved, close quote. The same can be said about canons, as I've explained. Furnace and Fugue offers modern readers and musicians a set of digital tools to explore the puzzling polyphony of Maier's alchemical fugues. Back to you, Alexis.
That is awesome. Thank you for sharing. It really is like a puzzle within a puzzle within a puzzle within a puzzle. So we have some great questions coming in here from the chat. I am going to start off with Tony, sorry, who says, do we know if Maier played an instrument?
Well,
curious.
He was definitely very interested in music and loved music. And A few of his other books there's one publication of his that has a detailed description of organs in England, which makes me think that he may have been a keyboard player. But we don't actually know that much specifically about his musical practices. Like most early modern sort of educated upper class people, he certainly would have been musically literate and interested in sort of following what was happening musically around him.
That makes sense. Okay. So I really love this idea of him just deciding, you know what, I can compose the rest of this. That's fine. I've got it. I am actually, I want to bring up a question from Tom here, who says, do we know that Maier composed those extra 10 canons himself? How do we rule out the possibility that he might have hired another composer, albeit, let's say, differently talented? I like that description.
That's a great question, and something I wondered about myself. There's one other surviving piece by Maier that is included in a letter that he sent about a decade before Atalanta Fugiens was printed, was composed, arguably, or his part of it, I should say. The farmers' canons had been around for 2 decades by that point. Okay. But that piece that we have that is in Maier's own hand that survives in this letter is actually a canon that's structurally very similar to the Atalanta canons. And it has in it a set of errors that are exactly the same kind of errors in the same places that show up in Atalanta Fugiens. So that's not quite a smoking gun, but it's good enough for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. We have another question here. Let's see. Let's take it from Tracy. So do the interlocking entry points into this text make it more exclusive? Assuming fewer people would understand the images and the epigrams and the music, or more inclusive? Like, would people, because the music you're talking about, that seems like a pretty complicated puzzle to unlock. So would people have gotten it at this time?
I love to imagine these erudite, capable early modern readers who could sit down and they knew the whole alchemical corpus, they knew how to interpret emblems, and they knew It's hard to believe that there were that many people that could actually do that. Plus, as we were researching and building the project, we actually did an experiment where the book is quite small physically, and we wondered, what is it like to actually get 3 singers next to each other? It's really tough to read those small notes when you're 3 people crowded together. So I wonder how realistic Maier's fantasy that people would sing these pieces as reading the book actually was. It is certainly thorny polyphony. It is hard to sing, and it's got lots of accidentals, and it's got strange points of imitation. Even farmers' canons are hard to sing. So I get the sense that Maier wasn't that invested in making this accessible. I think he was more interested in capturing some complex stuff that he was fascinated in and inviting people to do their best to understand what he had put in front of them.
Right. That makes sense. So I think we'll take our last question from Ovid, who says to tell us a little bit more about how you managed to come across John Farmer's book. Is he an obscure figure you sort of found by chance? And is there repetition in the music? And if not, why?
Well, first of all, the melody that the apple voice sings is the same in all 50 canons. That's a bit of liturgical plain chant from a Kyrie, of all things, from a mass movement. And it's kind of cool when you think about the 3 within 3 within 3. A Kyrie has 3 repetitions of 3 sections. It's sort of structurally the same idea. So the apple voice is always the same, basically, in all the canons. Aside from that, each individual canonic voice, each Atalanta part, for example, is different. So there is no repetition there. I was really interested in this particular kind of canon, that what Maier calls a fugue, and what music theorists refer to as a plain song canon, or a cantus firmus canon, for those that care. And so I was looking at all of them I could find, and I had them all arrayed in front of me. And I'd heard that there was this weird German alchemy book that had some of them in it. And so I had it open, and the pieces were so distinctive, and I was really interested in them. And then I shifted back to the Farmer print, which is another very esoteric, book that like one copy survives.
Yes.
There it was. It was the same stuff. It was the thing that musicologists dream about happening, where you suddenly notice a cool connection between things that people didn't know had been connected to each other.
Wow. So I love it. I love it. It feels like so in some ways we are kind of going on an adventure. Maier hoped we would have done it hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but we're actually doing it today. So thank you so much for stopping by and telling us more about it. I think we're going to wave goodbye to you. And I think now that we've got emblems, we've got music, I'm really curious about what secrets are unlocked when we look at an old book in a new way. And so joining us to talk a little bit about making the digital edition with Donna is going to be Tara Newmandahl and Allison Levy. Now, Tara is a professor of history at Brown University. She's the author of Alchemy and Authority in the Holy Roman Empire. And she's written actually a ton of books. Anna Zieglerin and the Lion's Blood, Alchemy in the End Times and the Reformation of Germany. I don't know where she finds the time, frankly. That's what I'm going to say. But her work has been supported by the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the American Council of Learned Societies, and here at the Science History Institute, and the Gladys Kriebel Delmas Foundation. She teaches courses in early modern European history and the history of science. Allison Levy is the digital scholarship editor at Brown University's Center for Digital Scholarship. It's part of the library's digital monograph, which is a publishing initiative that's funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. She joined Brown University in the summer of 2017. And she brings together key sort of technological and organizational and academic resources from all across campus to generate a broader, more effective structure within the university. So this is how you get all these things around creation and cultivation and evaluation, preservation, new forms of sort of faculty-driven digital scholarly projects, which kind of is what brings us to making the digital edition. I guess my first question is, why would you make a digital edition? And I think we'll bring you three on to tell us a little bit more about it.
Hi again. Well, why don't I start us off on that question with an origin story. Why make a digital edition? I've been fascinated by Atalanta Fugiens for years and years and years, and I accidentally stumbled on a reference to it when I was supposed to be working on my dissertation, actually, which is on a different subject. And my curiosity about Atalanta Fugiens led me to really want to invest some serious time in just thinking about it, talking with other scholars, and really trying to unpack this book. So I was fortunate enough to get a postdoctoral fellowship right after I had defended my dissertation at the Science History Institute. That's where I had the fellowship, not the dissertation defense. So in 2013, 2014, I was a fellow at the Institute. And yeah, that's where I was really able to take a deep dive into this book. And the funny thing is Michael Maier is a polymath, right? And most of us today are not. So you really do need to collaborate with experts in different fields in order to unpack the riches of this book, which is what I organically started doing every time I encountered something else about this book that I wasn't trained to, didn't have the disciplinary toolkit to unpack. So by the time I finished my postdoc at Science History Institute, I was working with about 15 different people, mathematicians, music performers, rare books curators, different historians of all kinds. And I was really fortunate that the library director at the time, Ron Bashir, supported a workshop, and that was held in March 2015, to bring together all of the people I'd been working with, plus a few extras. And here's where I nerd out and say I was a huge fan of Tara's from the get-go. And this was my chance to fold her into the conversation. So, and we were fortunate to bring in Jenny Rampling, Pete Forshaw, and some others that weren't part of my original community, but then came into the community through the workshop. And we spent a weekend, and oh my God, that's also where I got to meet Lauren, and it literally changed the course of my life. So thanks to Larry Principe for introducing us. At the workshop, it was just experimental. We were performing with the book. We had a lot of questions about what would the next step be. And I had always seen this as, you know, the next stage is a digital edition. Like, by now you can see that this book is really difficult to handle as a conventional printed monograph. So this is where Tara and I, our alchemical union, can I say that without being weird and gross?
Do it.
Tara approached me after the 2015 workshop and said, look, Brown University Library has just received this Mellon Award, the Digital Publications Initiative. Do you want to propose? An edition of Atalanta Fugiens. So we did that, and lo and behold, we were chosen as one of 2 pilot projects. So this is where I think I passed the baton over to Allison to talk about maybe the origin story at Brown with how this became formalized into a digital edition.
Thank you, Donna. Well, as I think all of the viewers and listeners this evening are now well aware, this is a highly collaborative project that goes beyond even the very wonderful interdisciplinary and international scholars and musicians and vocalists. The team also extends to a very talented set of experts at Brown, designers, developers, technicians, librarians, editors, and of course, a wonderful team at the University of Virginia Press. So we're very grateful for that collaboration as well, which was always the end goal with Furnace and Fugue, to have this work published by a university press to ensure that it gets the critical recognition that it deserves as a printed scholarly book would. From the very beginning of Tara and Donna coming together and conducting workshops to all of the efforts at Brown and then our collaboration with Virginia, it's been a really very busy few years, but a very exciting, very lucrative collaboration and set of partnerships. Furnace and Fugue is the first project that came into the initiative, which is supported by the Mellon Foundation. And we have continued to take in other projects. We now have a total of 7 in the portfolio, and we will continue to take on more projects. I think the very important role that Furnace and Fugue plays is to really open up the doors, not just for faculty at Brown, but around the world, to think about what is possible beyond print. And that is always what's been driving us. Every decision that we make around Furnace and Fugue and our other digital scholarly publications, how can we articulate and advance scholarly arguments in ways that before now just couldn't be done on this level. And so we're really proud of the work that we did for Furnace and Fugue and the reception that it's received so far. We look forward to seeing it reviewed. We look forward to applying for scholarly prizes. And I think this is just the beginning of what's to come in the new, very rapidly evolving and very exciting landscape of digital scholarly publishing. And Tara, I might turn it over to you now.
So I think I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to show you all what we created. So on this question of now you know why and sort of how we came to create this digital object. But I'd like to, you've seen a little bit of it from Lauren's wonderful presentation about the music, but I want to show you a couple of other features. So Naomi, if we could bring up the site, that would be wonderful. Here we go. So when you go to furnaceandfugue.org, this is what you find. And when we thought about digitizing it, there were several things that we wanted to do. And the first thing that we wanted to do is think about audience and really make this, you know, puzzling, delightful, beautiful book accessible to all kinds of different people. We had in mind, of course, scholars. And so you can see we have a collection of scholarly essays here, but we also wanted to make it accessible to really anyone who wanted to explore alchemy, even people who didn't, you know, approach this book with any knowledge previously. And so we have these 3 get acquainted essays that introduce you to sort of what early modern alchemy was, who Maier was, and how the book itself was made. So that was one thing, is thinking about making it accessible to everybody, right? To our students, but to anyone really who wanted to jump into exploring this book alongside scholars as well, of course. So that was one thing. The second thing is that if I go here to the digital edition, we wanted to explore this idea that you could really read Maier's emblems in all kinds of different ways, that this is not a book to be read necessarily in order. You could start with the title page, but maybe you really enjoyed Donna's presentation and you just want to go back into emblem 3. And, you know, maybe you really want to read it in the original Latin because you know Latin, right? Then you can switch to Latin. Or you can stick with English, right? So that's another way that we wanted to give people multiple paths into it. And the final feature I want to mention is the collections feature. You can search through all these emblems, all the different emblems in all kinds of different ways. So if you are really interested in architecture and you want to look for all the bridges, for example, you can, you know, bring up all the emblems with bridges. And then once you do this, you can build your own collection. So down here on the bottom is this emblem collection. I've built a few in advance just to sort of give us a sense of things. If you were interested in dragons, you could pull up all the dragon emblems, or maybe you want to follow Sol and Luna across the course of the book. And so you could create your own collection of emblems and you could really study that. And you can see here with Sol and Luna, it's emblem 11, 25, 30, and 34, right? You're not reading in order, but you're kind of charting your own path through the book. Now, these are things that probably Maier didn't necessarily want people to do, right? I think we can take down the site now and go back to just seeing the 3 of us. Maier, you know, we had a question earlier about accessibility and, you know, did Maier want everyone to do this? No, Maier was kind of a snob. He was really interested in the status of alchemy and making it clear to everyone that this was not, you know, just kind of a grubby artisanal practice, but this was erudite, this was knowledge, this was philosophy, right? And he wanted it to be hard. He wanted it to be, he believed that the secrets of alchemy were some of the most important, precious, divine secrets, and he wanted people to have to work for them. So in a way, we're kind of, you know, we're kind of betraying Maier's mission by making it easier for all of you to engage with this book. But at the same time, I think we all agree that Maier would love Furnace and Fugue. He would love the fact that you can hear the music now. That's not something he could have done in the 17th century. And we see ourselves as giving all of you a point of entry into this book to explore it, both, you know, again, for scholars, for students, for music folks who want it. We have a performance edition as well in the book, and really giving all kinds of different audiences a way to jump into this book and explore it for themselves and to their own ends.
So first of all, this is fantastic. I will fully admit that I've spent a lot of time that I've called work time getting lost in this book, but let's just say I've spent a lot of time.
7 years getting lost in this book.
That's true.
Be careful.
Exactly. And I want to say, so everyone is really excited. We had a great comment from Paula who said she can't wait to use this with students, and is giving us all a big virtual toast. But I think you brought up a really good, there we go, toast. You brought up a really good point about making this accessible. And I guess I'm curious about what are the things that you envisioned you might be able to do with this sort of in your wildest dreams that then reality was like, that is not possible, my friends? Or did you just kind of anything that you envisioned with this, you were able to do?
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah.
It's because this was a really interesting element of our collaboration, because between Tara, myself, and Allison, and then the whole digital team and all of the web designing and web work that went into it, there was a lot of collaboration. So we would all brainstorm ideas and then learn, from the technical side, what we had to compromise on or recalibrate or reimagine, do in a different way. There was a lot of prototyping. So I don't know that we, in my experience, in my view, I don't feel like we lost anything. Rather, I had my mental horizons, expanded from this experience in terms of understanding just how we can connect our imagination to technology that enables us to take a really deep dive into research and analysis and interpretation in new kinds of ways that, it's not to the exclusion of the book. For me, it was a really important union of working with the book and working with the technology to reimagine the book. And there was a lot of photocopies on walls being marked up, a lot of people talking, like that whole image collection that Tara showed, that was basically physically mocked up. So I felt that we gained a lot, but I'm happy to hear others.
Now, I'll just say like a really quick thing, which is that we always had in mind that we were publishing a book out of this. So one thing Furnace and Fugue is not is an interactive site where all of you who explore the book, a markup comments on the emblems and we comment back or something. It's not that kind of a site, really, right? So that was a decision that we made, that we just couldn't handle that. Right. So we give it to you and go forth, please, and send us emails. But we didn't build that into the site.
Yeah.
Yeah, it from the beginning, this was intended to be a born digital, exclusively digital scholarly publication that would undergo peer review and be published by a university press. That's the task that the Mellon Foundation set for us. This was the first one. There are a few other institutions who are also exploring these possibilities. And, when we started, there was no model. It wasn't that we were reinventing the wheel. We really were inventing the wheel with Furnace and Fugue. There was nothing to look toward. Right. I mean, there were websites, but they were designed as supplemental websites to printed books, or there were digitizations of already published scholarship. And this was brand new. And so we feel that we have created a model, and we hope that others will build upon what we've done and also follow this path, take this approach to digital publishing. But it is a one of a kind publication. And I see that I'll just jump on a question that came in about conservation, preservation of a digital publication.
Right. Yep.
Of course, very crucial, something that we think about from day one. So we do have we have a team at the Brown University Library that focuses on maintenance and preservation of digital projects, and including Furnace and Fugue. So it will be with us as long as we can keep it with us. There are great efforts to make sure that it doesn't disappear or transmutate into something. But I also want to say, in response to Donna, you're right. I think, I guess as an editor, my charge to Tara and Donna was think big, dream big. Let's just go for it and see what we can do. And we did have to edit, and there was editorial work involved. But I think that we managed to get everything that we envisioned. So it is a multifaceted, multi-layered project, and I think that comes across already in the presentations you've seen tonight.
And I know that we're like pedal to the metal towards cocktail hour in like a minute, but I wanted to say that, oh my God, and I just forgot what I wanted to say.
Well, there is a question for you if you want me to ask you the question. I speak for the audience. I'm gonna use my power. So we have another question from, I think we're going to take it from Sally, who has a question about making a VR version. And so we're sort of all like laughing, right? But in a way, she's sort of bringing up the point that technology has sort of opened up this whole new landscape, right? And so as you were saying, like, it was hard to envision this before, like, because there were only sort of websites. And so, I mean, is that something that maybe, I don't know, funders, if you're out there, but maybe you'll let us play around with something like that?
You know what? In one of our early brainstorming sessions, we did imagine a sort of virtual tour of Atalanta land, you know, and we were imagining, could you stick together some of the emblems, and is there a landscape in the background that you could actually walk through? That might be one of the things that got reined in.
Right. That's
we are open.
Well, there is an element of Atalanta that actually informs how we envisioned creating the digital edition, and it is the magic square. So if Maier did indeed construct his book around being an interactive mathematical puzzle that reshuffles the book, enables you to come up with whole new emblem pairings and groupings to contemplate, the ways in which we actually invite you, and this is the VR, we invite you to use your imagination to go into the digital edition and reshuffle it and recombine it and play it like it's a magic square. So there, we kind of built in a VR component to it, but it's in your head.
There we go. All right. Well, we'll stay tuned. Stay tuned. Maybe we'll all be like here in the VR version in the future, telling you all about it again. So, so I do think, thank you all for sharing so much about the behind the scenes of what went into this. I think it's time for that cocktail break that we promised. It will certainly get you in the Halloween spirit. If you registered for the event, you received a drink recipe, the appropriately titled Aurorium Pomum, or I mean, I guess if we're getting our Latin right, Pomum Aurorium, or Golden Apple Cocktail. That's from our friends at National Mechanics. When we were in person, they hosted our Science on Tap program, and they're great community partners. So you can get their menu, their hours, or place an order for delivery. I recommend the 3 cheese macaroni and cheese. You can do that at their website at nationalmechanics.com. And I think we'll take a little cocktail break and we'll come right back.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charlotte Abney Solomon. I'm the Assistant Director of the Center for Historical Research at the Science History Institute, where we run the country's largest fellowship program in the history and social study of science. At the Beckman Center for the History of Chemistry, we have around 20 scholars in residence as fellows here each year from around the world. Both our collections and the projects of our fellows range far beyond just chemistry. We also have resources for the history of technology, biology, chemical engineering, pharmacy, environmental history, the history of art, and more. We offer 4 types of funded fellowships for researchers. We have 2-year full-time postdoctoral fellowships, 9-month dissertation fellowships for PhD candidates. We also have short-term fellowships for 1 to 4 months, as well as library travel grants for visits of up to 2 weeks. Both the short-term fellowships and the travel grants are available to a broad spectrum of researchers, including grad students, junior academics, senior academics, journalists, and others whose research could benefit from getting to see our collections. For more information about our rare books, archives, and historical scientific instrument collections, you can visit sciencehistory.org/research. And for more on our fellowships, please visit sciencehistory.org/fellowships. The fellowship application portal for the 2021-22 academic year will be opening within the next few weeks, along with a brand new guide for applicants. So I'm here tonight to join Tara and Donna to talk for a bit about each of their experiences as fellows at the Beckman Center in the past. Hi there, Tara. Hi, Donna.
Hi.
So my first question for you both. Donna talked a little bit earlier about her experiences here working with the Atalanta Fugiens at the Science History Institute as a fellow. But could you each start by telling us a bit about your past fellowship experiences here and just more broadly how they fit into your careers as historians?
You want to start, Donna?
I thought we were going to flip a coin and
okay.
No, I'll start, sure.
All right, I'll chase you.
So yeah, I mean, Tara and I have actually, this for me is a really cool interview situation because we've both chosen paths, sort of like that emblem that Lauren was talking about, the eagle flying east and west that like go circle around and then meet back together. Science History Institute, like that fellowship really, oh gosh, it's not too much to say it did change the course of my life. You know, in one's journey, you do encounter these crossroad moments, and sometimes you recognize it at the time, and sometimes it's in retrospect. But the Science History Institute supported me in really special ways. They just the fellowship gave me freedom to think and to talk to just like an amazing diversity of other scholars. And I found community. I wasn't expecting to make deep and lasting friendships, and I wasn't expecting to have support and encouragement from my project that would go above and beyond the tenure of my fellowship. In many ways, Atalanta Fugiens, this project, is the story of a project that almost didn't happen. And if it wasn't for the intervention of people associated with the Science History Institute, like Ron Brashear and Karin Berkowitz and Jim Vogel and others when I was first starting, and now, you know, at this sort of the afterlife of Atalanta Fugiens, now with a whole new group of people, Michelle DeMeo, Charlotte, Daniel, others. I mean, this is the project that made me decide to become an independent scholar. And the seeds were planted while I was a fellow at the Science History Institute, before I even knew that. But as I started chasing Atalanta and as I started making career decisions based on wanting to do what I felt was the right thing by me as opposed to the expected thing of me, Science History Institute throughout the last 7 years has been there every step of the way to support me as I've stepped out in this way within academia. And what the fellowship ended up supporting was the creation of a core team that then got exported to Brown and then was able to grow and become Furnace and Fugue. So for me, the fellowship was everything. It was amazing.
So I really agree. This is such a lovely way to come back to the Institute. I, like Donna, I had a postdoc, and so I had just finished my dissertation, and I had applied to the Institute with a different project. And so what that year gave me was an opportunity to sort of set aside my dissertation for a moment, which is so important because you need to figure out what you want to say about it, how you want to turn it into a book. You need a little distance after the intensity of writing a dissertation to sort of set that aside and begin to imagine a different project. And so for me, the postdoc project at the Institute became my second book on Antigone and the Lion's Blood. And that year gave me the time and the community and the resources to really sort of imagine what that book could be. I didn't finish it in a year. It took me a long time to finish it, a long time. But I had done some archival research, both for my dissertation and for that book. And it gave me the space to kind of really think about it and to chart it out and to have that imagination and the freedom to kind of think about it as a book. And I'll say also that on the side, the fine arts collection had just sort of started to appear at the Institute. So I was a postdoc quite a while ago. And for my dissertation, it was really archival. I'd been in the archives in Germany, and it was a dissertation about the issue of fraud in alchemy. What's the difference between a real alchemist and a fake alchemist? And I was so sort of immersed in the archival documents, I hadn't thought to write about that as a cultural question. And what the Fine Arts Collection gave me at the Institute with so many paintings that sort of are these depictions of the alchemist, and fraud is a theme that runs through all of them. And it really made me think differently about my work, and to think, you know, there's a story about the kind of cultural idea of the fraudulent alchemist that extends beyond the people themselves and who they were fighting with, and so on and so on. So honestly, that 1 year not only allowed me to articulate a second book project, but it completely changed what became my first project. And then to have Donna invite me back for this workshop on Atalanta Fugiens, you know, to launch what became Furnace and Fugue, you know, is sort of a perfect way to come back to the Institute now in 2020.
That's wonderful. Donna, do you have any other specific favorite pieces from our collection outside of the Atalanta Fugiens that you've gotten to work with?
Christmas is coming, and Jim Vocal, if you're listening, you can give me Atalanta as a gift. You know, I won't say no. but yes, I mean, Science History Institute has an amazing collection of alchemical printed books. But the other research interest that I have is in jewelry studies. And frankly, the richness of your 1950s materials collection is mind-blowing. And the magazines that you have, the pieces of laboratory equipment that past companies have donated to you, there are some toxic things in your collections too, but that are really well maintained and hermetically sealed up and otherwise.
Yes, they are.
I'm thinking of your 1950s chemistry set collection. Like, I ended up writing, while I was a fellow at Science History Institute, I ended up writing a piece for Distillations on 1950s atomic age jewelry, and that enabled me to take a deep dive into your photographs and magazines and other types of associated materials with 1950s atomic age. So someone like me who does 17th century alchemy and is also interested in 20th century jewelry, I mean, I was like Alice in Wonderland, was like, oh, and what will this day bring? So that would be my other, in truth, aside from the rare books collection, your 1950s collection is, yeah.
All right, so with 1 minute left, if each of you, I know that you each have students watching tonight. I know that you each have students that you supervise. So what advice would you give to any of your students who are interested in a fellowship like this one, preferably one of ours, at a library like ours, preferably at ours? What advice would you give to your students out there?
Other than to definitely apply for a fellowship. I think, you know, what this fellowship allows is for sort of an open mind, right? Exactly what Donna is saying, to like, you might come in to study a 17th century book, but keep yourself open to other things. Or in my case, you know, the paintings, which I didn't think I was going to work on. And also the public history aspect of this. I mean, the fact that we're doing this tonight, right, is something that I think most graduate programs, although things are changing, graduate students don't get as that much experience in the kind of public history. So, you know, I really do think this is something they should explore.
You know, I stated earlier that I decided to become an independent scholar, and this is a choice that I gleefully and joyfully embrace and move forward in doing. My advice is do what you think is the right thing to do. Don't just be aware of what is the expected thing to do, but be open to where your curiosity may lead you, and follow it, even when it gets disquieting and uncomfortable, because that's where the path forward makes itself known.
All right. Thank you both so much. Congratulations on the launch of this amazing project. If anyone out there has any more questions about the fellowships or the fellowship program, you can reach us anytime at fellowships@sciencehistory.org. And otherwise, that's it for me. I hope to hear from you on our email.
Hello once again. Wow, that was quite the journey from the early modern to the present. The bar is now open, and since I have no wish to delay your partaking in, as Donna mentioned earlier, an alchemical process, I will make this a brief farewell. All of us involved in today's program really hope you had a great time and learned something with us this evening, both about the enigmatic and hopefully now not quite so inscrutable Atalanta, and the cutting-edge digital scholarship in Furnace and Fugue. If you did, please check out the other events listed in our event calendar, follow us on social media, and kindly consider making a donation so that the research of our fellows and programs like this one, we can continue to make the history of chemistry, chemical engineering, and the life sciences informative and accessible for people around the world. My name is Daniel John Mitchell. I remain the director of the Center for Historical Research at the Science History Institute, and I raise my glass of pomum aureum in gratitude to Tara, Donna, and the Furnace and Fugue team, the generous Roman Haas Fellow in Focus endowment that supports this program, and to you, our audience. We hope to connect with you again in one form or another sometime soon. Goodbye.